My father's story is my story. When I came home from school, my mother would ask me, like religious clockwork, "What did you learn in school today?" When I was in the 4th grade, I told her we learned about the heroes of Pearl Harbor, about the hideous Japanese surprise attack, all the men that died, the Arizona, and all of the surviving men who heroically did everything they could to help and rescue the injured and trapped men. I remember this day very clearly, my teacher's passionate message and my mother's reaction. As I went on about what I had learned about the heroes, my mother calmly asked, "Would you like to meet one of those heroes?" Amazed and surprised that my mother actually knew a Pearl Harbor survivor, I say yes. She told me, "Okay, go do your chores and homework, and I will introduce you to him later." So, later that afternoon, I hear my father drive in from work, as he always did, and as we always did, we went to the door to meet him. He opened the door, took one step inside the house, and my mother said, "There is your hero." I was flabbergasted. What? My father is one of the heroes my teachers were gushing with pride about? I remember saying, "You're one of the heroes?" Emphatically, he replied, "No, I am not a hero. The heroes never made it home." That was my first memory of connecting anything to my father being at Pearl Harbor. At that time, little did I know that my mother knew very well all about the war and Pearl Harbor. After the war started, she was one of the first ladies to join the Navy. As a kid, I remember looking in my dad's locked cabinet. In amongst his prized possessions was an ivory slide rule. He got it off a one-man Japanese sub that had run aground in the harbor. Dad said there was a Hershey bar in the sub. American candy? When we were at war with Japan? This very odd occurrence removed any suspicion that traitors were providing the candy. When women were allowed in the service, the ladies in the Navy were called waves. Women accepted for volunteer emergency service. My mother was stationed at Pearl Harbor and had a top-secret clearance as a storekeeper. She worked with the Pacific Fleet's ships' provisions and had knowledge of where the fleet was going, who was on board, and how long the cruise was based on what food was on the ship. He always said that they all knew America would get sucked into the war. No one knew how or when exactly, but they all knew we would be involved. Dad was attached to the Litchfield, an old World War I four-stacker. It was a light cruiser, as I recall him saying, the Admiral's flagship. Dad had asked several times for a transfer to the Air Corps. As in his exact words, I did not want to be a sitting duck. The transfer was finally approved when the fleet went into Pearl for fuel and restocking provisions. Dad was dropped off at the sub-base to get a later troop transport to Moffett Air Station to get his air training. Fortunately, the Pacific Fleet was back out to sea before December 7th. In all of the years that I had asked my dad about that day, he rarely ever said anything. He might start to tell a little, then he would get suddenly silent. It's like a puzzle I've tried to put together throughout the years. A little info here and there. And now, after so many tries, the puzzle is nearly complete. This is what I've gleaned from him as to the events of that day. The Japs were after our 2 aircraft carriers. He was on the 3rd floor of the sub-base barracks. He woke up to all hell breaking loose. He, like everyone else, ran downstairs. At the door, rifles were being passed out. Dad had a .30-06 bolt-action Springfield. There was so much chaos. No one had a clue what to do other than take a gun and defend Pearl Harbor. As he ran out of the door, he looked around for a safe place to shoot from. We ran down the pier where the submarines moor. At the end of the dock was an old steam shovel that had been dredging the channel. Dad climbed into the iron bucket and waited for the Japs to fly over. He took several shots at the planes, and one was hit, had lots of smoke, and crashed. He never knew if it was his bullet or someone else's, but it crashed. He always wondered if it was his bullet that did the job. Dad said it was so chaotic with so many planes in the air that he watched two of our own planes have a head-on collision over Hickam, which is just to the south of Pearl. He saw the battleships get hit on Battleship Row, and he saw the bomb fall onto the Arizona and the massive explosion. Dad never once told this much of the story in one try. He would always freeze and end it when he realized that he was remembering. Over the many years, I would get snippets of the story. Once, we were discussing watchmaking and repair. He mentioned that he had a good buddy who was a great watchmaker who stationed on the Arizona. By the time he reached the ship's name, it came out Arizona. End of conversation. It was always that way. He would recall something that reminded him of something horrific that day, and bam, end of conversation. Dad said that it ended up taking about 6 months to finally get to Moffett. He either doesn't remember the rest of that day or just refused to ever think of the rest of the day. The rest of the day was nothing compared to that morning. As I remember the details of all of the stories I've heard, my mother's story picks up right after the war started. The worst, most sad story that my mother would relate of the aftermath was the tapping. All who related the tapping to my mother, including my father, said it was gut-wrenching. After the bombing ended and the rescue efforts started, the men that were trapped were tapping out Morse code messages of how many were injured, where they were trapped, in hopes of being rescued. Every day, the tapping got less and less until there was no more tapping. The story was always told with such reverence and quiet sadness for all of the men who had been tapping messages who were never secured. For many years, we continued to try to get my father to join the PHSA, Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. We thought it was so important to tell his story and get it documented. He still refused. Like a typical 10th generation Revolutionary War descendant, West Virginia-born Scots-Irishman, he stubbornly refused. Dad never spoke of the attack. He said over and over that he had been there, seen the devastation, lost so many friends, he didn't ever need to think of it again. Over the years, we asked him many questions, and as time passed, he revealed few memories. Mainly, my mother would proudly repeat his story, and he would nod his head as if to say, "Yep, that's what happened." Now, I repeat the story for him. In 1991, my father received a manila envelope in the mail. It contained a small, flat, dark green velvet box. He opened it to find it contained a bronze commemorative coin for the 50th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack. He took one look at it and irrepressibly announced, "It's about damn time." And they waited until most of us were dead. He was not impressed at all that the government had waited 50 years to honor the survivors, since so many were not around to see it. Over the past 10 years, my husband would drag my dad to the meetings, hoping to get him interested. But no. They were even honorary members for quite some time. Finally, after 69 years, I think he realized that he was the only man, the only survivor who did not have the white ceremonial cap. And he wanted that official white ceremonial cap. The only way to get the official white cap was to join. Undaunted by numerous illnesses and surgeries, this time he volunteered his memory. Although burdened, he volunteered his memory to tell his painful story on video. After 70 years, my father finally became an official member of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. He never felt the need to join until he wanted that official white cap. Now he has the cap. My father's experience taught me many things, like remember Pearl Harbor and loose lips sink ships. This is my father on the 70th anniversary. He is holding his Navy boot camp graduation photo from 1938. This is Dad with the Navy Honor Guard. He turned 95 in July. My father's story is my story as the daughter of a Pearl Harbor survivor and a Navy wave.
I'm trying to figure out what you remember.
I don't remember a heart attack. I don't remember too much about that, Betty.
That's okay.
That's a long time ago.
I know, that's okay. I guess that's why I can repeat the stories now.
Yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to remember. Mm-hmm. Dad was attached to the Litchfield, an old World War I four-stacker. It was a destroyer, as I recall him saying, the Admiral's flagship. When I was a kid, I remember looking in my dad's locked cabinet, as we often got to have a peek. In amongst his prized possessions was an ivory slide rule. He got it off a two-man Japanese sub that was hit on December 7th by the ward in the harbor. It was lifted from the water on December 21st and placed on the pier at the sub base, where Dad was temporarily until he got a transport to air training at Moffett.